All right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm certain that this is the most registrations we have ever had for an event. So that certainly speaks to Heidi's draw. I saw she posted it on TextBird. So a shout out to all you TextBirders out there that are joining the program. I know we have a lot of our collision monitoring working group that have joined us as well from across the state. So welcome to you. My name is Richard Gibbons. I'm the Conservation Director for Houston Audubon. This is our March speaker event. Houston Audubon is a local chapter of National Audubon. We've been around for about 52 years now. And we are an accredited land trust, got 17 sanctuaries in and around Houston. We encourage you to come and visit us. We have more education programs than I could possibly remember, but Mary Ann can tell you all about that, or check out our website if you like. Spring is here. It is well underway. Our first wave of migrants are here, and there's some hope in the air with the pandemic beginning to wane. And the vaccine's out, so people are looking to get out and get excited about spring migration. All of these birds that are traveling north have many challenges, in addition to the normal travails of just the actual migration. They have loss of habitat, they have outdoor cats, they have climate change, and to top it all off, a billion birds each year collide with glass and pass away that way. Someone that has led the charge is with us tonight to help us understand how we can come together, work together to better understand this particular issue of collisions. Heidi Trudell is a Texan from the greater Houston area, Clear Lake. She has spent much of her life in Texas, and then has moved off to the Midwest. Keep trying to find a way to get her back to Texas. So if y'all can help us, that would be great. Heidi has been instrumental in helping many architectural projects become more bird safe. She is out there constantly trying to help people better understand this problem and mitigate the problem. And I could go on all night, but this is not my show. This is for Heidi, so I am gonna hand it off to you. For 1 second, Heidi. Here's the run of show. Heidi's gonna give her presentation. We're gonna do some quick questions at the end. And then after that, Anna Valerie, our bird-friendly communities person, is going to go over 2 or 3 slides and talk about the local actions that we're taking. And then we'll have a second question and answer period after that. Without further ado, thanks again for being here with us, Heidi. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really glad that we had a good turnout for a Thursday afternoon in the middle of a pandemic. It's quite humbling. And I will start, if this will actually let me forward slides, by adding a disclaimer that this presentation is from me. I'm not speaking on behalf of any organization. While I do collaborate with schools and nonprofits, this is an independent thing. There will be pictures of dead birds. I've tried to minimize them because nobody actually wants to see that. And I should state right up front, I do not receive product commission, but if I did, that'd be amazing. So feel free to hit up your friendly local bird collision product distributor and tell them to hire me. That being said, my research is basically funded by my day jobs, and thankfully there are some wonderful humans on Patreon who help support the gap that is otherwise out of my budget. So that's been able to send me to Costa Rica to talk about birds hitting windows down there. I don't know why this is not letting me actually forward slides. So just an overview of this presentation. We are going to discuss why birds are important. what some of the unnatural threats are. We're going to address light pollution collisions, daytime collisions, and taking action. I want everyone to walk away from this Zoom feeling empowered with tangible ideas to change things in your own lives. This is going to be amazing if the slides will actually. Okay, so I don't think I need to convince anyone here that birds are valuable. They are absolutely critical for ecosystem health, and they're culturally significant. There's a quote from Barbara Kingsolver. She was asked, "Why do birds matter?" And her response was, "Why do birds matter? Imagine asking a cardinal why humans matter." And again, they have such a profound impact that some of us have accidentally or intentionally completely modified our lives around them. So this is exciting. My notes don't match the slides. Cool. So where are birds at risk? This is totally a trick question because even in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, half of the tiger sharks off the coast of Alabama have songbirds in their stomach contents. And one of the thoughts there is that perhaps when birds are circling the lights of oil rigs, they get exhausted, drop into the water, and sharks have learned that this is an easy buffet. So it's a big issue, much bigger than we tend to give it credit for. But also in North America, every biome is seeing declines in bird populations. And because this is window collisions and mostly forest birds, that's where most of the emphasis will be. And yes, I'm gonna zip through the first few slides because 90% of this is window specific. And the human causes that are pretty obvious are cats, glass collisions, vehicles, and everything else on down the line does add up. Every drop adds to the bucket, but it's estimated that anywhere from 599 million to a billion birds are hitting windows. And that is exacerbated by outside cats and other various human threats. So this cartoon, the oatmeal, is fabulous. I highly suggest folks look it up. I will have a link to it at the end of the presentation as well. I'm gonna keep it short and simple on the cat topic because they need to be indoors. It's safe for them, it's safe for us, it's safe for wildlife. And if they don't want to be indoors and they just can't handle it, catios are a beautiful opportunity for them to be outside safely, and it's fabulous enrichment. Also, if catios are not an option, cats are smart. Leash training has a lot of resources available now. There are Facebook support groups for how to train your cat to be leash friendly. And they will figure out that if the harness means that they get to go outside, they can and will. So it's just a matter of enrichment and working with your cat to make that happen. So again, we're gonna jump through some of these earlier points. Light pollution is bad for people. I know that I have never lived in a place where neighbors did not have massive floodlights. It's extremely bad for humans, and it's a waste. I don't know if my mouse is actually visible here, but even house level streetlights end up getting into second floor windows where none of that light was supposed to go at all. And while we are talking about light going where it doesn't need to be, the Post Tower in Germany has the same problem that a lot of other tall buildings in geographically sensitive areas have. The McCormick Place in Chicago also discovered that turning off their lights at night, they could reduce mortality by 80%. That being said, we don't actually have numbers on their daytime strikes. These are very shiny buildings in sensitive areas. So while we know the bulk of the collisions were at night for both of them, turning off the lights reduces the night collisions, but doesn't actually address how shiny they are during the day. And the mortality that still occurs is at each end of the building because they have the elevator shafts with the emergency lighting that they can't actually turn off. So if they could, it would probably go down even more. And unfortunately, glass is the way architecture is going right now. If you look at the older buildings, they're lower, there's more brick and mortar to actually block out light from the inside, but that's not what architects and building owners like. So we need to address blackout curtains, room dividers, task lighting, other things to reduce the outside light pollution, as well as outside decorative lighting. And as was mentioned, I grew up in Clear Lake. I went to Space Center Intermediate. I lived less than 2 miles from NASA. I thought I knew about space. And it wasn't until I actually went out to Big Bend that I finally saw the Milky Way, and that is a tragedy. So not only are birds being completely disoriented by our light pollution, there are generations of us who have not actually seen a truly dark sky. And that's not okay. And of course, now we're looking at more satellites being added to the actual sky, which certainly doesn't help with sky pollution. But anyway, to make things better for everyone, the International Dark Sky Association has some really fantastic guidelines on how to use light responsibly. And it's cheeky, but the off switch is a fantastic solution to all of our light concerns. It's the FBI building in DC ended up turning off their lights during migration and saved over 20% on their electric bill. So that's also a huge carbon footprint reduction. So we can combine a lot of these goals to get to the same end results, which benefit everyone. So daytime collisions, this is going to be the rest of the presentation. By the time you walk away from this, you hopefully will recognize the scale of the problem, have sorted out some of the myths and lies about collision prevention. You will be able to spot hazards, and you will know how to tell all of your friends to help birds when they ask you in a panic what to do. But also we need to be empathetic, because as we've seen with the new Apple building, people hit glass too. And sometimes architects just don't understand that maybe it's a bad idea to put free floating glass in between a column and a wall in front of a restroom. This nature center had so many people walking into the glass that they put giant tape X's over the windows because it was really bad. And starting with my case study, this is my local library that was bad enough that I went to Costa Rica to talk about how bad it was. There's nothing geographically special about Southeast Michigan. You could take this building and put it pretty much anywhere in the Midwest and get pretty similar results. So, oh, it's tragic. It's the big red circle down in the right-hand corner of the map. And you'll notice behind it, there's a little blotch of green. That's a woodland. I want to say it's about 40 acres. And if you look at the dead bird list, the Ypsilanti District Library killed 26 birds in just over 2 months, which sounds like a lot. It could be a lot. But when you start comparing it to the other worst buildings that got a dozen each, that is significantly higher. And it starts raising our little red flags of, hey, by fixing this one building, it's the equivalent of fixing 2 other buildings. Or if you look at the Eastern Michigan University list, all 7 of those buildings combined barely exceeds the total of the Ypsilanti District Library. So if we want to focus our efforts where they will do the best, we need to identify the worst buildings and then fix them. Because we can fix 6 buildings at the Eastern Michigan campus and only offset, you know, a dozen deaths in 2 months. And species diversity was really impressive in the fall. Super sad though. And I will also note, collision monitoring, nobody has a detection rate of higher than 30%. So any numbers you see here, that's a really, really small fraction of what's actually hitting, and a relatively small fraction of what's dying. So this was my worst day at the library. Walking back to my car after taking this picture, I picked up 2 more hummingbirds. That was not a good day. I put this here to give a visual of when I talk to architects and local municipalities, the concern is, well, these aren't our birds that are dying. Our local birds are fine. I see blue jays all day, every day. Cardinals are everywhere. Those aren't the ones that are, I mean, they are hitting, but in much lower numbers. And they're not the ones who are facing these challenges, you know, twice during migration, heading north and south. So yeah, if the boreal forest is absolutely pristine, and if Central and South America are absolutely pristine, that's great. But if the US is just a giant maze of glass, eventually we're not going to have birds at either end of migration because they all will have died in between. It's not an instant zap from north to south. They actually have to stop and feed along the way, and that's where they're at risk. And I made this slide on March 1st. That's just a screenshot of the top of Peter Senger's collision tracking page. And the most recent addition was hoary redpoll. So that's disappointing. However, it went to rehab in Ottawa and apparently was released. So that for once was a relatively positive story. So all of this sounds like there should be dead birds absolutely everywhere. And a lot of folks tell me that, you know, they've heard a bird hit every now and then, but like they don't understand why it's a problem. But unless you're looking for it, you're really not going to see it. I was fortunate enough to have stepped off the sidewalk and looked down and saw these 2 hummingbirds. Had I gotten there after a lawnmower, there would have been no trace. And I don't know how well this works over Zoom, so I apologize. This is the same picture, side by side, and I don't think anyone has ever actually found all of the birds in this picture, but if you want to take a guess at how many there are, I will let you squint at the screen while I take a sip of water. So I guarantee you also the people throwing the cigarettes down did not see all of them either. But if anyone actually did count all 5, hats off. Oh, there we go. So if anyone wants to squint and see where those birds were. And this was right by a hospital door. So again, they're there, we're just not looking. So how did we actually get here? Birds can't see glass. Migratory species are most at risk. None of this is natural selection. Something that is invisible and kills you does not allow for a learning curve. The only birds that are at risk are birds that are near glass, and unfortunately, that's not something they can control. Oh, and again, when people look at these pictures, they're probably not seeing dead birds unless you're right up on top of them. Also, a lot of buildings up here, and I guess it's maybe because of the snow melt drip line from the roofs. they have these rocks at the base of the building, and birds are rock colored and rock sized. Either that or the rocks are bird colored and bird sized, but it's really challenging. So approximately 50% of the birds that hit glass will die on site. There are a lot of questions as to how accurate that is. We know that we're not finding all the birds that are hitting. We're also starting to find out that of the birds that fly away, the survival rates are probably lower than we would hope, just due to lingering internal lingering internal injuries. But for the lucky question mark, few who do survive, they're stunned. They're on the ground. They are at risk of being eaten by a lot of different things. I actually chased down a squirrel when I was doing research in Illinois, because I walked around a corner and he had a bright red ruby-throated hummingbird in his mouth and went up a tree, and I sprinted after him, dropped it. And so UC Santa Cruz now has a ruby-throated hummingbird in their collection that has squirrel slobber on it. Birds are just tiny little packets of protein. So, oh goodness, my biggest pet peeve is when folks say that they found a bird that hit the window, but it's okay because it died quickly of a broken neck. There have been x-rays done on so many window birds, and 3%, if that, have actually shown broken necks in the x-rays. We all know that herons have amazing zoopy spines. Like birds can scratch the tip of their tail. Birds have phenomenal range. So when they're dead, their neck is floppy. That's just how they are. They're not humans with a limited neck range the way we are. So that being said, and this is where it gets sad and where I apologize to you profusely, but even the birds that do survive have a lot of internal injuries and do need supervision. ahnow.org, animalhelpnow.org, is a fantastic site that I will walk you through here momentarily. But what we see is not the whole story. We almost never, unless we hear the bird hit, go out and check. We don't know the whole story. We don't know how long the bird's been on the ground. If a bird hits and you can grab it, because that is probably the best chance of survival it has. And even if you can't take it to rehab, grab it anyway. Keeping it safe is the most important thing at that moment. But yeah, they look peaceful, but we don't know what the story is behind that peaceful look. This is from, I want to say, Kansas City. It's heartbreaking because this is active suffering that we can prevent by fixing our windows. So Animal Help Now is amazing. They use your location, and then you select whether it's a wildlife emergency, wildlife conflict, or another issue. And it pulls up a list of rehabbers based on the information you've provided. So I'm in Southeast Michigan. The type of bird, or the type of animal, was bird. So it already narrowed down the list of rehabbers for me. And then you can pick, so like Bird Center of Washtenaw. I'm on the board for that, so that's a disclosure there. So if we have a cardinal, it goes to the Bird Center of Washtenaw. If it was a kestrel, it would go to Morrison Animal Hospital because they take raptors. But they provide just enough of a blurb to let you figure out who you should call. And even if you can't get a hold of your first choice, just keep calling rehabbers until you can actually get a hold of someone to talk you through what their preferred protocol is. I think that covers. Anyway, so now we're going to figure out what exactly we're looking for high-risk buildings. Like we know what to do now that we've found an injured bird, but where are we going to look for them? So unfortunately, structural traps and U-shaped buildings are becoming more popular for whatever reason. But we're going to take a look at some of these options. Oh, yep, and there's a bird. Again, fallen leaves are the worst thing because yellow leaves look exactly like fall warblers, and fall warblers just look like dead leaves. So corridor effect. This is walkways between buildings that are raised. This is anytime birds see habitat on the other side of a barrier. Indoor plants and atriums have the same issue. They see food, they see shelter, they go to it, but there's glass in the way. So curtains or room dividers, anything to break up that visual line is the goal there. Reflections, we see these all the time. This is probably the most common issue that we see on buildings. You have to delineate the boundaries between solids and non-solids. This building is fantastic on the first floor because we know exactly how solid it is and where the solid portion is. The second floor, however, reflects canopy height trees, and it's agonizing because that's a driveway down underneath it. So birds will hit the glass, fall onto the driveway, and even if they've survived that, they get run over. So I hate it. I really hate it. Habitat is another interesting topic because architects want to put fantastic shiny boxes in urban areas with the understanding that it's surrounded by concrete and bricks, so it's safe. Unfortunately, concrete does not make a building safe. It might lower the risk factor, maybe, but it's not a prevention method. So this is the Viking Stadium. It got a lot of really bad press when it was built because they could have used 0.1% of the budget to fix the glass before it went up, and 0.6% of the budget to fix the windows after construction. They have declined to do either. So this building is going to kill upwards of 300 birds a year, potentially 500 birds a year, and that's not even in good habitat. If you dropped this building in the woods, it would be much worse, obviously. Easily 10 times as bad. But just because it's surrounded by a city doesn't inherently make it safe. Freestanding glass is another problem. This is a bus stop in downtown Detroit. I didn't see the glass until I thought about it, drove around the block, and was like, oh, I really should take a picture of this. I apologize for the photo quality. Photos from moving vehicles tends to be a thing. But yeah, for something like that, all you have to do is add a little bit of etching, or there's some fantastic murals on bus shelters. Seattle has etched glass in a wave pattern on their bus shelters. So they're really fantastic ways to make things visually aesthetic, but also effective. So on the right, it's a train station in Germany. I would have flipped the stripes around so the thicker ones were up top, but you still get the safety and transparency that you want while making sure people and animals don't bump into it. And unfortunately, a lot of people think that dirty windows are safe. There is no such thing as safe glass unless it meets a very strict set of parameters. So the clearer it is, The lower the reflectivity, the higher the reflectivity, whether it's angled down, tinted, none of it's actually safe. And unfortunately, every website ever, starting at least in the 90s, and unfortunately still today, they're promoting stickers. If y'all want to count stickers here, again, I don't know how well it works over Zoom, but this is the same picture side by side. And if y'all find all of these mad props, there are 4 decals, but unfortunately, every orange Post-it note was either a print or a smudge of actual feathers stuck to the glass. So we can see that, yes, there are 4 spots that birds did not hit. However, 24 birds were not so lucky. And approximately under a quarter of birds that hit will even leave a print. So I was very upset about this building. My first freezer purple finch came from this window. So yeah, you will see this window again in a little bit, but just know that stickers, silhouettes, do not work unless you use a ton of them. And I know like 3 people who have ever actually put up enough decals for them to be effective. And looking back at the quarter effect, I bet a lot of you noticed that there was at least 1 hawk sticker in the background there. There were at least 6, but that definitely did not stop any birds from hitting either side of that corridor. And this is when I ask for you to bear with me. There's some weird analogies that I'm going to use. If you're driving down a road and there's a chair in one lane, you're going to drive around it. If it's on I-45, it might be a ladder, a mattress, a barbecue grill, somebody's tailgate. Like, you're going to drive around it. Now, if there are so many chairs, pianos, tailgates, ladders, that you have to drive all the way to the edge of the road, then your behavior has been modified enough to not continue going forward. Traffic cones are fantastic for the reason that they modify your behavior. If there's one cone, you'll still go around it. And if they're only like 2 or 3 and they're spaced really far apart, you might slow down a little bit, but you're still probably going to go around it. So for birds, because they're in a 3D space, we need effective spacing for them to completely change their behavior, which is why we have stripes or other, pretty much anything that covers the bulk of the surface, as opposed to random spots, because birds don't identify leaves, they don't identify snowflakes, they don't identify raptor silhouettes. You can put whatever you want there as long as they're enough that birds won't fly between them. Because birds are extremely aware of their sizes. They'll fly full speed through hurricane fences. That's what they do. Oh, and real quick while we're looking at this. One analogy is the parking lot analogy. If for some reason you find yourself in a completely empty parking lot with like 2 or 3 light poles, you can floor it and do whatever you want. If there's a car in every other spot in the parking lot, you will be going very slowly and figuring out where you fit. And that's what we're dealing with birds. Except birds are going face first without a helmet. And we don't have to consider what life is like if our first instinct is wrong enough that we die before there's a learning curve. So off-the-shelf solutions, there's so many different things. They're customizable. The pricing for off-the-shelf options is usually pretty significant. But again, they're infinitely customizable. But I want you to keep in mind the outside surface of the glass, high contrast, and close spacing while we look at these options. So from the inside out, what you see is what the bird sees. External solar shades, from the inside looking out, it's like looking through a screen, but cardinals are not going to attack their reflections here, and nothing is going to hit it. It's a fantastic option for privacy, energy efficiency, and it will stop collisions. ABC bird tape. You can do whatever pattern you want with it. They come in a couple different sizes. This is actually the inside of the Seattle Audubon office. Acopian bird savers. These are super easy to do on your own, either with, they're made of nylon paracord and spaced every 4 inches. They're also called Zen wind curtains. If you have issues with smaller birds like hummingbirds, siskins, any of those little guys hitting, you might want to do them at 3-inch spacing rather than 4. However, bird crash preventers, I'm going to put an asterisk there. It's made of fishing line, and I don't have enough data on their performance to say whether or not I would suggest it. So I'm going to very cautiously say, if you want to try it, go for it. Again, what you see is what the bird sees, and in shade, I don't know if it would be as effective as it would be in sunlight. Kaleidoscape. I generally do not suggest that people use the clear product because nobody uses it effectively. However, they're solids, they're prints, they're patterns. It's a perforated vinyl that storefronts use, buses use for advertisements. So it's very durable, but the clear product, people grossly misuse it and take the bird safety claims a little too far. So that window that we saw earlier with 24 feather smudges, this is what kaleidoscape dots look like from the inside looking out and the outside looking in. The only downside here is your homeowners association might not necessarily like the contrast on that. But again, they do have different colors and you don't have to use it on all of the windows. You can customize which windows get which treatment. That's certainly an option as well. And I do want to brag about Feather Friendly. This is a school in South Korea that had a collision issue. And these are the students that I worked with to get it fixed. They fought their administration and they won, which is amazing for students to, to actually get change happening in a way that saves birds. But since this is a residentially focused presentation rather than commercial, we'll also throw in a normal house with Feather Friendly on all the windows, and your homeowners association may or may not notice, they may or may not care, but from the inside looking out, again, it's not super visible. And their default spacing is 2 by 2 inches, which is actually hummingbird safe. 2 by 4 is not hummingbird safe. And hummingbirds are about 20% of what I pick up in the Midwest, which is heartbreaking. And then the last of our off-the-shelf options is Solix BSF, stands for Bird Safe Film. I think this is from the inside looking out, but this is the new Intuit building in California, and they have pretty much cut all of their strikes. Birds apparently still fly towards the glass and get awfully close and then veer away. So that's all we're asking for. For DIY solutions, it's the same thing. We want to focus on the outside surface, high contrast, close spacing. And not all products will perform the same across all situations, but these are certainly more exciting options if you like artistic creativity. So this is just chalk markers. They're cheap. You can get them on Amazon or at Walmart. Just every 2.5 inches, a stripe goes a long way. So this is, again, chalk stripes. Doesn't require any creativity in this case, just requires ideally the outside surface of the glass. Apparently this window got like 3 or 4 siskins in a week. So my friend went out, got the chalk markers, fixed it up in half an hour or less, and it's good to go. But also, this is an excellent teaching opportunity for kids. If you need to distract children, you can get chalk markers and tempera paint in a wide variety of colors and thicknesses. The thicker the line, the better. Again, outside surface is preferred. But this is a great way to introduce kids to how to prevent strikes, what kind of spacing is good. You can change it every week, every month. Most of them are fairly durable, so they'll stay up until you actually physically wipe them off. So I'm a huge fan. Additional options for DIY solutions: beaded curtains, densely spaced CDs that are hanging. Soap art is not as bold, but it looks really cool. If you don't mind, the smeary experiment lipstick is also a very highly visible option and works in a pinch. String, yarn, whatever you have on hand is a great temporary option while you figure out what you want to do long term. And if you can't get to the outside of your windows, like if you're in an apartment in the middle of no outside access world, you do need to put the Post-it notes really close together. So it's a checkerboard rather than the widely spaced out ones. And it won't work in all lighting situations, but it's certainly better than nothing. Whew. And for non-glass options, as they say, with a great yard comes great responsibility. Just planting native, using less herbicides, using fewer pesticides, not using sticky traps. Also, if you have an amazing yard, cool, but don't attract birds to something that's dangerous for them. So if your windows aren't fixed and for whatever reason you can't fix them, maybe don't feed the birds. Or if there are too many outdoor cats in your neighborhood, it's okay to not feed birds. It's not awesome, but it's safer for them. So you can also help with community science like eBird, iNaturalist, Bird Mapper, which I'll talk about more in a little bit. Bleaching your feeders. It's cool to feed birds, but if you don't maintain their feeding situations to keep them healthy, then that's just spreading disease. Not using red dye in your hummingbird feeders is a great idea. Nectar doesn't naturally have any of the artificial colors. Placing feeders on or within 3 feet of windows is super important. The closer the feeder is to the glass, the more likely the birds are to actually survive. They will hit. As long as glass exists, birds will hit, especially if raptors chase them off. But if the feeder is on the glass or within 3 feet, they really, at least the birds that go to feeders, will not be badly harmed. That being said, you can have a feeder on your window and an ovenbird will still smash into the glass next to it because ovenbirds have no concept of bird feeders. So you should still fix the glass around your feeders, but that is a start. And Karen from Waco, now lives in Michigan, sent me this photo of her cat watching the feeder with a Halloween decoration outside the window next to it. be creative, use all of your decorations year round, whatever helps keep your windows covered. Anyway, yeah, so encourage catios and indoor cats. And this is a fun one. Coffee and windows are actually much, much more closely related than you would expect. And this study is only from Jamaica, but I've seen some similar numbers come out of Costa Rica and Guatemala. Basically, birds are incredibly important for pest control on coffee farms. And every bird that has a red arrow next to it is one that I've had in my freezer. And by one, I mean, at this point, probably a couple hundred. So the more birds that die hitting our windows, the fewer there are to eat coffee beetles. So coffee beetles are incredibly bad, and the pesticide used to control them is highly toxic. So the more birds that die at windows, the more pesticide goes into your coffee. So I don't actually drink coffee, but I buy shade-grown, Smithsonian, bird-friendly certified coffee for all of my friends for every occasion, because it's a little bit more expensive than regular coffee, but it's good for birds. It's just there's no way to lose when you're supporting shade-grown coffee. Anyway, so fix your windows, or I guess drink pesticides. It's kind of brutal, but if architects would listen to that, I think we would change things a lot faster. Okay, so you've got indoor cats, you're drinking shade-grown bird certified coffee, your lights are off at night, the rest of your life is falling into place. You can still report bird strikes through birdmapper.org/app. Or if you can't do any of the above because you don't have cats, you don't drink coffee, and lights aren't really an issue, you can still report incidental strikes. Or there are collision monitoring groups across the US and Canada. Odds are good that you're probably near one of the orgs or not. And even if not, now you can identify which buildings might be problematic. And yeah, woodcocks. This is a woodcock in downtown Detroit that unfortunately hit one of the biggest, fanciest buildings here. They're extremely overrepresented in window collisions, which is kind of bizarre. It's like all warblers and woodcocks. So let's say you do decide that window collision monitoring is something you want to do. It's a super easy thing. Ziploc bags, Sharpies, tags. Unfortunately, at low rises, we find maybe 3% survivors. So having your rehab number is good. Most people aren't going to need nets, unfortunately. For super urban early morning collision issues, nets and paper bags and rehab info will be important. But otherwise, it's unfortunately not that critical. And then permits. I put permits in bright, bold letters down there because if you're not finding much, you can coordinate drop-offs with your local collection, and that's fine. If you are finding a lot, like me, oh God, I don't know how many hundreds of birds I brought to Texas A&M, because Dr. Arnold is amazing and wonderful. But yeah, a couple birds here and there, you probably will not need permits. Just make sure that communication is open between you and your permitted people. When I moved to Michigan, the university, it's like 15 minutes away. I asked if I could get added to their permits, and they're like, oh, well, you know, you're really close. Just every time you've got a couple birds in your freezer, bring them over. And I was like, I got a couple every day. It's not really an option to go over there every day. But yeah, universities, nature centers, the Houston Museum of Natural Science is awesome. I've donated birds to all kinds of places. So yeah, most places will take specimens, but you do need the date, the location, the cause of death, their contact information so they can follow up if there's something cool about your bird. County records. I want to say it was the first scarlet tanager in Taylor County hit, I want to say Abilene Christian University's windows. So all kinds of science when you when you look underneath windows. And I think I actually nailed it on time, almost. Again, huge thanks to the folks who have had faith in this project, even though it's super sad. Ultimately, the goal is more live birds. So I think we're getting there. And then this is probably the most complicated slide of the entire set. If you want to take a picture or a screenshot or something, this is the reference heavy bedtime reading, at least for 101 Ways to Help Birds. Laura Erickson's book is phenomenal. We're working on a sequel, which is exciting. But in the meantime, that highlighted link down there for birdfriendlyyards.net/consumer guide has the most up-to-date information on residential post-construction collision products. But a flap and ABC have done so much in getting collision information out there. A lot of this could not be done without them. But it takes a village. There are hundreds of collision monitors across the US and Canada, and the world, we haven't quite figured out how many groups there are in other countries due to some language barriers. But this community has really, it's really grown. When I started this in 2003, it was basically Dr. Clem and like 2 other researchers in Chicago, New York, and Toronto actively monitoring. And now there are dozens of cities, now including Houston. So yeah, thank you again so much for being here. And I hope we have enough time to answer a couple questions before the Houston slide.
All right, I am imagining a huge, uproarious round of applause for Heidi. Great job. I would like to encourage you, if you have a question, you can type it in the chat, and I will read those out, and we'll let Heidi address a few of those. And when those, after 2 or 3 of those, if we get some, then we will transition to a short little session led by Anna Valerie on what our local efforts are. All right, here's a question. Can you say it again? Which building in New York saved 20% energy bill when they turned off the lights?
That was the FBI building in Washington, D.C. And I want to say it was closer to 27%, but don't quote me on that.
And are there any documents for that energy saving benefits?
Yes, that's a question for Anne of, what's the City Wildlife, the rehab center in DC. She got the information from them. They've been working closely together for like a decade now, I think.
I can add anecdotally a building in Galveston that also turned their lights out. I think, and Anna helped me out here, but I think they, in one spring session, I think they saved about $5,000. So that's something that's really compelling if you're trying to make the case to a business.
One thing I did forget to mention that I just realized, in all of these slides, you'll notice I did not mention anything that was based on UV, because UV solutions fade quickly. They have to be replaced frequently. and they're not magic. So carry on.
Wow, because there's a lot of UV glass out there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
even that glass that has the layer in between that's UV, that fades?
I have thoughts and opinions on Ornolux, unfortunately, because it's
unfortunately, it sounds like they're not very good.
Well, it's always either on surface 2, which is not the outside surface, or it's on surface 3 for double glazed glass. So the further away you get from surface 1, the more it's going to be overpowered by the external reflections. And because birds see UV, people latch onto that and they're like, wow, birds see UV. But birds also see our visible spectrum as well. So they see not just a UV band, they see the rainbow and a UV band.
And everything combined.
So to overpower all of that, you need a lot more than UV that's a few layers in.
Right, or UV external, like on the outside.
Yeah, and so like for the UV leaves, they don't have to be UV at all. That frosted spot is something that birds are going to fly around. So acid etch glass is the way to go, in my humble opinion.
There's a question asking if you could elaborate on the Kaleidoscape Clear.
Yeah, so Kaleidoscape Clear is clear perforated vinyl. If you cover an entire window in it, from the inside looking out, it looks pretty okay. From the outside looking in, it looks slightly frosty, but it doesn't really overpower any of the reflections. And most of what they sell is the Kaleidoscape Clear tape, which people then put either every few inches in stripes or in dots every few inches. And so you have something that doesn't really change the reflection on top of a reflection. So there's really just not enough visual contrast there or change in image that the bird sees, which is really disappointing. Because we all want the invisible solution, and that unfortunately in some cases can work, but it's like 3 times more expensive than the regular Kaleidoscape and way less effective.
There was a question about how long the chalk markers last on the windows. I think you said they last until you wipe them off. Of course, I guess the beautiful art imagery may start running with sideways rain and all of that. But
no, they actually don't run. It's more of tiny flaky bits. So for example, the window art on the building next to mine, because I'm in downtown Ypsilanti, so I'm next to a pub. They have had their takeout instructions on the side of their building since the beginning of COVID. You can still read it. It's sun bleached and a couple spots are flaking off. But I mean, unless you go up with a wet washcloth and smear, it's still there.
I like the DIY solutions.
Yeah.
That's nice. All right, anyone else? Going once. Okay, thanks again, Heidi. Amazing. I'd like for you to stick around. And maybe after Anna takes the helm and has our slides, there may be some additional questions that pop up that you could help us with. Anna, are you with us? So I think maybe Heidi, you stop sharing your screen and we'll have Anna share her screen.
Okay, let me know if that works.
Good. All right. Let's get this started. Thank you, Heidi. That was so interesting. I was super excited to have you here, especially because we're kicking off spring migration in Texas. And that means lights out for birds. And so I just wanted to briefly kind of share what we have planned for this spring in regards to lights out, because we've had a lot of big changes, big exciting things on the horizon. So Houston Audubon's been working, we've had our Lights Out for Birds program since 2017. Richard and several other people worked together to develop the program after a big collision event in Galveston. And last year, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology reached out to us and they were like, hey, we were using Cornell and University of Colorado, I believe, the Aero Eco, Kyle Horton We were using their birdcast technology to make a lot of these predictions about when people should be turning out their lights during migration season. And we kept tagging Cornell, and they were like, this is great. Let's partner and bring this program across the state of Texas. So this year, we have really ramped efforts up. And I will say, last year, Dallas totally whooped us. And Dallas really made some great progress that last fall, both with collision monitoring and with getting their city government to pledge to be lights out. And so they had a bunch of really big, tall, bright buildings in Galveston dim their lights pretty substantially for the fall migration. So yeah, we started working this more heavily this year with Texan by Nature and several other partners across the state to start working together and to really start targeting government communications across the state. City of Houston's on the plan, Galveston's on the plan. We've got a bunch of different cities who are all trying to work together to make our corridor through the state as safe as possible with turning our lights out. And with that, Cornell actually has started to automate the lights out alerts that Houston Audubon's been sending for a couple of years now. And so if you want to take your phone, everybody should be good at this now with COVID. QR codes are now all the rage, but that QR code should take you to the website where you can sign up for any of those cities. It's still in the first phase. So those cities listed, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and so on. You can sign up and get alerts every time migration is predicted for high migration is predicted for the city you sign up for. And it's really great. They started this last fall and I signed up for the Houston alerts. And every time high migration is predicted, you get an email saying, hey, high migration, turn out the lights. It's also great for all of the birders, I am sure, are on here to help you with your birding plans. And they're going to be expanding that list in the future, hopefully for the whole US. So stay tuned if your city is not yet on the list. And then the last thing is we're starting this statewide collision monitoring. And so the collision monitoring, like I said, is happening across the state. Partners from El Paso, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, I mean, even Galveston, Surfside Beach, Galveston we're all kind of diving into this collision monitoring together. And we've worked to develop a pretty robust protocol with several labs, Scott Loss from the University of Oklahoma. And so we're really hoping to get a nice picture of what's going on across the state. This is, I will preface this is the first year that we're all doing this, the first year we've developed the protocol. So I'm calling this the pilot year. And it being the pilot year means we're relatively limited on the number of routes we can do. But if it works well, which I have confidence it'll work well, we'll be expanding routes to other places in the future. But the data collected from these collision monitorings is hopefully going to serve as the baseline to compare bird collision mortality rates across the Texas cities participating, and also to kind of dive into hopefully help us understand what is contributing to these collisions. We know that lights attract birds. We don't necessarily know how. We don't necessarily know why. There's all these big questions that have yet to be answered regarding this. And Heidi touched on that quite a bit. It's a very interesting question area that I think we're very excited to start to dive into. We're also have the goal of using this opportunity to increase education and awareness with the goal, and then eventually having the goal of seeing a decrease in the number of collisions across the state. The education and awareness going towards governments and buildings to start participating in lights out more and more. So I know you guys are all probably zoomed out, but if you are interested in participating in this pilot year of collision monitoring, and I'm just speaking for Houston right now, but if you are on this call and want to volunteer somewhere else in Texas, you can also shoot me an email. I can direct you to the right person. But we have a route in downtown Houston, and I am the contact for that if you'd like to volunteer. Kristen Vale with ABC is on the call right now, and she's the contact for the Galveston monitoring route. So both our Houston and Galveston folks can email us if you're interested. I will say it's early mornings. We're hoping to kick the route off. We're hoping to cover every day between April 1st and May 31st, right at sunrise, and collect those and get the routes done before 2 hours post sunrise. So yeah, you'd be signing up for early mornings, but We're all birders here. You all like early mornings, I'm sure. And then that being said, the collision monitor training is going to happen via Zoom on March 22nd at 6 p.m. That'll be recorded. If you really can't make it, we can make sure that you have access to that information and can join along for the collision monitoring. So that was like me talking super fast. Apologies, that's just how I am. If you have questions about collision monitoring in Houston, about the Lights Out program in Houston or across the state, please let us know. I'm excited to hear them and have you all involved with the monitoring.
Great job. All right, so in the chat, again, if you have questions about any of what Anna just presented, any questions that held over and came to you for Heidi, you have another chance now. All right, from Facebook for Heidi. Any favorite HOA-friendly window products?
That is a really good question. I mean, the thin stripes are barely noticeable and they're easily removable. So that would be what I would start with. And if you can get away with that, I would move on to other things. Yeah, just I think it depends on how strict your HOA is.
I would agree with that. Some are a little more strict than others. Okay, here's another question from Teresa's second iPad. Did you say that window stickers do not have to be UV? Seems like that's all I see in the bird stores lately.
They don't even have to be window stickers. You could like take cutouts of anything that's weatherproof and stick it on the outside of the glass.
Just got to break up that reflection.
Exactly. That's kind of why I suggest lipstick, half jokingly, because it's awful to clean. But it's bright. So not only will hummingbirds not hit it, they'll slow down when they approach it and they'll investigate. But yeah, there's nothing fancy about UV. It just sells really well. And they also don't sell them in 20 packs, which is what they should be selling them in because the packaging says 1 per square foot. Still isn't close enough, but like they only sell them in 4 packs, which anyway, I have thoughts.
Anna, will you repeat the dates for migration monitoring? And I know we've got some shoulders on an intensity. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, and so we're attempting to monitor every morning between April 1st and May 31st, but really our target is to get peak migration, which for our region is April 19th through May 7th. So we definitely, that's the priority, is to get all of those dates covered, but the more dates we can get covered across April and May, the better, in both Houston and Galveston.
Right.
You can also reassure folks that if they're not early morning people, you can check low rises. It's actually best to check low rises around 2 in the afternoon, but 10 to 11 a.m. will do most of the stuff for you.
Yeah, and we're encouraging people to use the iNaturalist or what was the other website?
Bird Mapper.
Bird Mapper. Yeah, if you find bird collisions, please upload that information. We are using the iNaturalist to help us kind of identify buildings to look at. So that information is definitely useful. If you see anything, please go ahead and share that.
Here's a question from Monica. Can you recommend any reading about the after effects of window strikes and rehab for those birds?
Ooh, so after effects, not offhand. I'm trying to see. So Animal Help now has an entire info page on collisions, but for actual rehab, you'd want to talk to your rehabbers. Best practice right now, according to the IWRC, is pain medication, anti-inflammatories, and supplemental oxygen. But there are a lot of old school rehabbers who still say just put the bird in a box for 2 hours and then check on it. I'm not a fan of that. 72 hours for supervision lets you know whether or not they ruptured an air sac or anything. So the longer it can be supervised, the better, but that's definitely a question for a live bird person. I do the dead bird side of things.
All right, last question And I do not know the answer. And I am an iNatter, an iNaturalist user. How do you notate an iNaturalist bird deaths? Had several during the winter storm, as I think we all did, and don't know how best to record them. I'll and jump in after, but for me, I probably did what you did, Jamie. I went ahead and entered it and identified it, and I didn't notate it. I just it was dead, and so I need to do the same thing. So I'm looking for the answer. If anyone knows the answer,
There's actually a project on iNaturalist for Winter Storm Uri. I don't know what it's labeled other than
right? I know you have to add the project before you can have it in your instant add-on.
I think you can add that in hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully.
I think you can after. All right. Thanks again, Heidi, Anna, everyone for being here tonight. We are looking forward to a spring migration filled with hope. I certainly got some hope after hearing tonight's presentation that we can make the built environment a safer place for birds. And so I want to thank Heidi for all of your work. And many of you I know that are on tonight are also out there doing your best to make the world a better place for birds. So thank you. We encourage you to visit Heidi's website, Houston Audubon. Go local, find your people, get outside, share your passion. Anyone else have anything else? Otherwise, we'll call it a night. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks again, Heidi.
Take care, y'all. Good to be here.